50,000 feet, I am proud to think that we have spent our lives doing a decent job raising kids because they are good kids. And more importantly, all four of them are very loving parents.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Dadnormous. It's Jonscott Turco, and I'm here with Chris DeCristoforo. How's
Got
that?
it.
It's a
Good.
tongue twister, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate you joining us today. We'll just have a conversation, and I look forward to your feedback and thoughts as we go forward on this. So if you can, just start off telling us a little bit about yourself, about your family, and I know you're a dad, I know you're a granddad, so feel free to share as much of the story as you wish.
Well, I will start with the fact that I am actually a native Bostonian.
Okay.
I was born in Boston. I went to school in Boston, both grammar, high school, and then Northeastern. From Northeastern, I joined the ROTC program where I was a commissioned officer in the Army and left from Boston to join the Army the night of my graduation, and eventually got stationed in Korea for a year and a half. And the short story is when I came back from Korea, I started to do my looking for a job. And in that process, I applied to IBM. IBM invited me down to White Plains. I always tell this historically, on November 22nd, 1963. If you're from Boston, JFK was a very close person to us. It was personal. I met the man a couple of times in his senatorial time. So when I got to IBM and I interviewed on the day he was assassinated and spent through 5 interviews, got to the end of that interview, I always tell the story. I went up to the personnel director, and unlike these times, they offered me the job that same moment. And I actually had the gall and audacity to suggest that I can't do this right now. I'm going home to Boston and grieve. So from November 22nd, I started IBM in December of 63. And I spent 25 years inside IBM, and I've spent the next 31 years serving IBM as a vendor manager, providing former IBMers into the business as consultants. Okay. And that's what I still do. I started with my own contract, sold to Headway, sold to GES. Today, I'm a unit within a company called Attain. Okay. I married my wife in 1969. We have 4 children, 10 grandchildren. My fortunateness is, if I have to measure the first step of my fatherhood, is my wife and I were colleagues in raising 4 magnificent children. Susan, my oldest, is a editor-in-chief of the Darien Times, has 2 beautiful daughters, Lucy Jane and Annabelle Lee. Amy, my second, is a Bank of America managing director, one of a few in the world. So she's got 2 wonderful boys, my 2 firstborns, Andrew and Austin. My son is on the island here in Staten Island. He is the assistant principal, athletic director, and head football coach of St. Peter's Boys High School. He has 4 beautiful children, Callie Rose, Bubba, Mark DeCristoforo Jr., and Shane DeCristoforo, and the baby Rory. I call Shane the spare, because those 2 boys carry in my name.
Great.
Finally, my youngest, Megan, is a teacher of preschool teachers. She actually teaches them with lesson plans and has 2 beautiful children in New Milford, Connecticut, Kathleen Lee and John Allen. So that rounds it out. If I'm to be measured, my wife and I, by where they are today, I feel pretty good so far.
That's great.
2019,
Sure.
We celebrated 50 years of marriage, and I turned 80. This year I'll be 81 in another few weeks. That's it.
That's it. Continue. The story continues.
Yep.
That's really fantastic, and I appreciate the detail. Thank you very much for that. If you think about this, and going back, how old's your oldest, Susan?
Susan is actually 50.
Okay.
Susan was born. I remember my kids by the years they were born. Then, It's amazing. Go ahead.
So if you think about it, if you could go back in a little time machine and talk to Chris circa 1969, right before Susan was born, what advice would you give yourself back then that you think would be beneficial for you over these last 50 years as a father and grandpa?
Well, the opening gun when we were there, nobody prepares. I told everybody, I tell my kids, there's no instruction book on this stuff. I grew up as an only child in Boston. I was the man of the house at 16 because my father was not always responsible. So I didn't have a time to with siblings or anything to know how that all worked. But I will tell you honestly, the one feature about all my four children is how loving they are. So I gotta believe that my wife and I, with each other, taught them how to love because they are very, very loving parents. When we first found out we were going to have a child, I think it happens to every family. We didn't know what the hell we're going to do. You know, this little baby comes into the house. My wife had had four cesareans. And in those days, the cesareans were split down the middle. It was hard. So it was major surgery coming home. We came home with Susan, and her mother came to the apartment. We had an apartment then, and she helped us out. But then she left. And I always said to my wife, I remember that moment when your mother left, we were now left with this child. What the hell do we do now? The baby, if she cried too much, we got nervous. If she was silent, we got nervous. So the first child was a learning experience. We nurtured her, we worked with her. And I will tell you, it was a scary thought. By the time Amy came along, we were a little bit more comfortable. We knew what we were doing a little bit. And we always joked, poor Megan, the fourth one. By the time we got to her, we probably cast her aside most of the time. She will tell you that. It's a learning experience. There's no book on it. It's caring, loving, and I think setting the example with each other, making sure you show you. She sees that you and mom and dad are together in this, and we're nurturing and we're trying like hell to make it all work. So that's what we did.
Great. And if you think about it, if you could, if anything pops up, if you could take a mulligan at some point in the last 50 years and do something differently, does something pop up when you think about that? Is there anything present for you with that?
Well, it's ironic. The probably the we joke because by the time my son came on, I'm an athletic guy, and I'm very much into sports. And when Omar came along, of course, we got totally involved in sports, and so we brought Megan along. If I had any suggestions in those days, it would have been to get Susan and Amy involved in some sports. I didn't know that. I was just raising girls, and I thought girls were fluff, you know, and taking care of them. If I had a mulligan, I don't know. I tell you, it was day to day. Did we make mistakes? I guarantee you we did. Uh, but I think we were overprotective, if anything, so we try to cover anything we were afraid of, you know. And so I guess the mulligan is we might have been too protective in the beginning,
Okay, that's fair.
until we learned how to back off a little bit and take it easy, you know, the pressure. But that was it.
And that brings up an interesting point. So for new dads or newer dads, what advice would you have for them in terms of embarking on this? You know, someone I spoke with a few weeks ago has a 3-month-old, their first child. So what advice would you have for him? And I should say this too, like part of the mission for this channel is just to be a resource for dads, because we're talking to dads from all walks of life.
Sure.
Kids all different ages, dads and granddads who are all different ages. So what advice would you have for a newer dad today?
Probably to back up a step and not get too nervous. Your first instinct is to be, if you're like anybody, unless you don't give a damn, is to be over cautious with everything. And it is a balancing act between not forgetting your marriage, not forget your wife, and not and backing off and giving equal amounts of time to everybody who needs it. The child will nurture. The child is stronger than you think. in the beginning. And so, you know, you don't have to cuddle it every 5 seconds to make sure they're okay. But it's a natural instinct of a new father and a new mother, I guess,
Sure.
to protect the child in all the ways they can. So I guess the answer is, from experience, I probably would back off a little bit and try to balance my life between my work, my personal stuff, my wife, and the baby. But at the same time, giving all the necessary requirements to that child. But
Yeah.
not be too nervous about it. They're stronger than you think, is what I found out.
Okay. Thank you. And you mentioned earlier that about your dad. So my question is, from your experiences with your father, are there things that you experienced as his child that you definitely said, you know, I'm not going that way? And have there been things that you experienced as his child that you said, I want to replicate those things?
Well,
Everyone tweaks, you know.
yeah, well, my father, uh, listen, we came from, I got to tell you honestly, I'll be honest with you. We grew up in the Italian ghetto of Boston, the North End. I lived in a cold water flat. My father was a laborer. My mother dipped chocolates in a chocolate factory. She's the one, the strength that made me go to school and make sure that I get an education. I worked with my father on construction sites in the summer. And that's when I guaranteed myself I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life. I would spend a day there working with him on the site. And even in a construction site, there's a pecking order
Sure.
from the masons and the carpenters to the bananas in the bottom, like me, who carried the bricks to the bricklayer, carried the sod to the bricks. So I knew I was in the lowest end of the scale. And I said to myself, I don't care what I do. I'm going to school. I ain't doing this. My father does it. I'm not doing it. So he on the good side, he always found something to do. We sold pennants at Harvard. He always found a way to make a couple of bucks and dragged me along in every of those situations. Balloons, buttons, Harvard football games, selling banners and mums. We did everything. I hated him for it because I couldn't hang around with the guys when I had to go out and work with him. He was a loving guy, had a great sense of humor. My kids will tell you that met him, Susan and Amy, but he wasn't that responsible. Okay, he drank a little bit too much every night in my neighborhood. The guys got together, sat around playing 3-7 in the club, drank a little wine. He came home a little tipsy, and my mother was a straight-laced woman. So I promised myself I didn't drink because of him for a long time. But he was a good guy. He did the best he could. I promised myself I'd do better, and that's what I did.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's a great legacy to carry forward, is to take the things that you feel are important and continue and grow on those, and to
Yeah.
do the things in the past. So that's an excellent message. And it brings me to my next point, which is I like to ask about legacy. You know, like, you are the living legacy of your dad and granddad and generation for you. And your kids and grandkids are the legacy that you have, and it's alive with you today. And if you can imagine your youngest grandchild.
She's Kathleen, little Kiki.
Oh, yeah, okay. So your youngest grandchild is Kathleen. So if you can imagine Kathleen at 40 years old.
I'm dead.
Yeah, we all talk about it. But if you think about, let's say this, if you can imagine all of your grandkids, 20, 30 years, and talking to their kids and their grandkids perhaps, and the legacy that you want to leave behind, that when they speak about you in the future, they have this really present. What do you want them to feel about you?
I was thinking about that, and I said to myself, the one great, I grew up where the old timers were upstairs and you didn't spend a lot of time with them. Although I always tell the story that my grandfather, when I was young, I will tell you this is going to be funny. I grew up in a family where my grandparents lived upstairs.
Okay.
They spoke Italian. My mother spoke both Italian and English.
Okay.
I was sure that when I grew older in my neighborhood, you migrated from multilingual to full Italian. That's what I thought, okay? So, but I did spend time with them because I used to love history, and my grandfathers lived during McKinley's assassination and stuff like that. So I used to sit with them and talk in Italian and listen to their times because they were living them.
Sure.
Okay, now the other side of that is I will tell you this. I am very, very grateful. My kids don't mind having me around. That's a testimony by itself. So I don't know if you know what we did. I had music in the house all the time.
Sure.
Susan sings very well. You know, Amy and Megan sing almost professionally. And Mark actually for a long time was the singer in our family.
Hmm.
Somebody do it. His stuff is still on the internet and his students sometimes find it.
Yeah.
They embarrass him once in a while. The point I'm making is they asked me, Amy and Megan went to this class and they used to go sing in recitals, and every so often they would ask me to come and sing a song, which I did.
Sure.
And every few times we did that. And then finally they said, Dad, let's do our own show. But we did have a 3-hour show in that little Don't Tell Mama off-Broadway joint, Cabaret,
Okay.
where Amy, Megan, I, and one of their friends, Carol, did a 2-hour show singing. We had a wonderful time. I still have it. We still show it. But the fact was that they wanted me with them. And, you know, it wasn't like, Jesus, I don't want to be around that. So the legacy, I believe, is translating to the kids because they love having me around too sometimes.
Sure.
So I feel very comfortable that as they talk about us, my wife and I, it'll be strong, good memories and very personal. And as I said, now with that tape around and stuff like that, they can see us a little bit.
Yes, and that's part of the mission for this too, is that to revisit this, you know, in time and to, you know, to get your perspective, you know, a year from now and see how things have grown or evolved. And
Uh-huh.
I think that the legacy you're speaking about, where you're active and present and engaged with your kids, is like it's the essence of why I created this, is just to revisit that and to have this be the conversation. Because frankly, I'm not sure about you, but these conversations just don't happen where people just speak about being,
Right.
you know, it's usually, we usually check in, you know, how's Jane, the kids, good? Okay. Then we get into like the real conversation, but this is the conversation, you know, so.
Well, I will tell you, just to tell you the truth, they love coming. They love visiting. My grandchildren love it. As long as that's going on, I feel good. We're not pains in the ass to them. We're people we can come and hang out with, have, you know, sit down and have some fun with, and that's what they do with us. And so we've been very fortunate that both my children and their children seem to want to visit us. And if that's the case, then we've done our job, is what I say. By the way, all of them have their degrees and master's degrees. So I always tell somebody, I think we did our job. All my children have good jobs, good lives. They have children of their own, loving parents. If I watch them, I think we did a decent job. That's what I think.
That's great. And if you think about this now, when you first became a dad and you imagined your life in the future, is anything existing today something that you imagined when you were younger, or is it just all gravy? Is it all just new and
Well, you know, I used to say when I was younger, I was 30 years old when I got married. A lot of people got married much younger than that. But I used to say that I was really not, I was dying to be a father, so I was an unmarried man and not a bachelor. So by the time I got married, I kind of was ready to be a father. I wanted to be a father. I enjoyed children. Uh, and it manifested itself over time. As long as we took care of them, I was looking forward to being one. My wife, too. She was born to be a mother and a grandmother. The two of us enjoy that part of it. We don't travel. We don't go anywhere. I have a job. I still work at it. We should provide whatever we can for whoever we can. But we don't go anywhere. We live in our house, especially now. But even then, we're not big-time travelers. Our best trip was going down to Lavalette or Tom's River, spending a couple of days on the beach reading a book.
Sure.
Other than that. But I usually have to travel sometimes with the company.
Sure.
You know, I've been to the places they send me to. I've been to Cancun and all that. winning certain trips. But fundamentally, we're homebodies. And by the way, we're not complaining about that too much.
Yeah,
You know?
I get it. I do. So if you think about this, now you have, a son and daughters and grandchildren and grandsons and granddaughters. And if you think about this in like a macro, like all the way zoomed out, is there anything that you have in mind that you'd want to share as we get ready to wrap up our talk now? Do you think about anything in like a broad sense as a father, as a grandfather, as a dad?
At 50,000 feet, I am proud to think that we have spent our lives doing a decent job raising kids because they are good kids, they're successful, and more importantly, all four of them are very loving parents. Especially when I watch my son with his guys, he's very nice to them. And it's not like guys, avoid, the mother has to do all the work. My girls do all that, but my son is very good with his children. Uh, so I guess overall, I feel uh, completed or successful and hope that I have a few more years to enjoy them all.
Yeah, for sure.
That's my goal now. Our goal is to enjoy the rest of our lives in their company.
Great.
That's the goal.
Yeah, it's a spectacular goal, and I know you are doing that as much as you can, especially these days with the corona. But otherwise, in general, you're a very active and engaged and a family together, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for taking some time and chatting with me today. And I really appreciate your time, Chris.
I just hope I haven't bored everybody to death.
No, definitely not. You have great stories, and I think, there's no format for this. It's just, speaking what's present for you. So I really appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.
For those of you that haven't yet, please subscribe. I'll put some links. And I appreciate your time, Chris. Thanks again.
Thank you.